Greetings, upstanders. Dr. O here. And so I got a chance to listen to the Best People podcast with Nicolle Wallace, and I've listened to a couple of them. And, shout out to Nicolle Wallace. It's a great podcast, and she definitely has, some of the best people out there. And she definitely brought up one of my people who I consider to be the best people, and that's Doc Rivers, legendary NBA coach, and of course helped bring a championship to the Boston Celtics, my hometown team, in 2008. But the reason what I appreciate about both of them is that both of them do not stay, Nicolle Wallace and Doc Rivers, they do not stay stuck in what they are told they're supposed to do. Nicolle Wallace is somebody who was in the Republican Party. I mean, she was deep in the Republican Party. I mean, she talked about writing the Swift boat ad, for Kerry. I mean, back in the day, and now you look at her as somebody who's not identifying as a Democrat, but is fighting for a Democratic cause. Working for MSNBC, you look at the platform that she's putting out because she clearly sees that this country is going in a direction that's not going to be good for the country. And when you look at somebody like Doc Rivers, you see somebody who people say, oh, you're just a basketball coach, stay in your lane. And he's like, absolutely not. I'm going to speak up about politics. I mean, one of the things I loved about the Celtics when he was the coach was he brought up this idea that comes from where my family's from, Central Africa and the Congo, Swahili word, Ubuntu, I am because we are, this type of mindset. So I appreciate, both individuals. So not just saying I'm just going to be a news reporter, just going to be a basketball coach. I'm going to speak up about the issues that are challenging this country. So I thoroughly enjoyed the podcast, and I felt like there were several things that they mentioned that were very positive and very important. I think it's very important that I love the conversation that they had about misinformation and disinformation. And Doc Rivers was talking about you can go to 5 churches and you feel like you're hearing the gospel, and then you find out every church has a different interpretation of the same thing. I think that's really important. I think it was also really important the way that they discussed young athletes today and the disconnect that they have. Just because they've been spending their whole lives preparing, but how they eventually will get there. I thought that was really important. I don't know if this is going to be a part two. I mean, there was a lot of deep stuff that was covered, and I was driving as I was listening. So I didn't get to take notes like I sometimes do when I'm listening. One of the things that I also appreciated was the fact that they understand this place and time. The fact that everybody, we need to have an all hands on deck approach to be able to speak up and call things out. One of the areas I disagreed, and there's only like literally one or two areas I disagreed, was when Doc and Nicolle were talking about this idea of, well, you can't talk about racism anymore, and you can't talk about like why to white men about the fact that, well, they didn't do anything, and so therefore they shouldn't be responsible. And I felt and he said that we spend too much time talking about the reasons why something happened. He said when people say, well, Trump won because that's a mistake. And he gave the analogy to sports. And he said that, a team won because they put up too much points. Well, next time we got to make sure they don't put up too much points. And that's the analogy that's really too simple as relates to American history. Because once we understand the because, we can challenge the because. Kamala Harris didn't win because, as a black woman, she ran against a white male who used 250 years of white male racist dominance in this country. He ran on that narrative. The I will protect white women. The I will get rid of people who don't look like us. I will make sure that I am making sure that only the history that you want to be taught is taught. He ran on that. That matters. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the biggest reason that he won. People can talk about economic policies and all of that other type of stuff. I just don't buy into that. And so I felt like that particular area of the podcast was problematic because even as Eddie Glaude says on her show all the time, he talks about America being broken. He talks about confronting issues. America has to confront its past. Dr. Rivers brought up the brilliant example of Nazi Germany and what happened after the Holocaust and the things that people did in Germany to deal with what happened during the Holocaust, like making it illegal to fly a Nazi flag. One of the parts that he missed about that was that, many people can't fly the Nazi flag or flying the Confederate flag, to kind of still express their ignorance and racism and hatred. But that's a conversation for another day. We need to be able to confront these issues. And if they're talking to a white person who says, my family didn't own slaves, and you don't know where to go from there, fine. learn where to go from there. One of the areas you can go from there is like, fine, you didn't own slaves, and I wasn't a slave, but the system that was set up for you, are you working to help other people get access to it? That's a very simple question. That's a very simple follow up. And some people are going to say no. Some people are going to say they don't feel obligated to. Some people are going to say they don't know how to do it. Some people are say I don't care. I got mine. And that really shows people where that shows us where they are. That's a real way. I thought, and so we have to be able to confront that. Another thing that they brought up, which I thought was very poignant, was, and then I did not think about this, was, obviously Doc Rivers was the coach of the Clippers during the Donald Sterling fiasco. So he was talking about that, who made those racist comments, the players boycotted. And there's a real strong similarity of what's happening with what happened with Donald Sterling and what's happening with Trump. One of the things that Doc Rivers said was that more pressure was put on him and the players than was put on Sterling. He said the news stories, are you all going to play tonight? Are you going to coach? And so on and so forth. And it was almost like they were giving Sterling a pass. Almost like, well, we expect him to do what he's going to do. What are you going to do? And we see the same thing with Trump. How much time do we spend on television saying, what are the Democrats going to do? What are women going to do? What are black people going to do? Without paying attention or putting the full focus on where it should be on the racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic messages that are coming out of this man every day. Why? Because that is part of American history of racism and sexism. White men historically have always been able to get away with these types of things, and everybody else has had to fend for themselves, to fend for the scraps. It's embedded what's happening with Trump and that response. And so when I think about the conversation that Nicolle and Doc had, more conversations like that need to happen. Really, at the end of the day, I think the Best People podcast is a great podcast. As I said, I'm a fan of both individuals, and so when I listened to it, I found it to be very refreshing, because I found people, Doc was saying something at the end. It's like, when people, you can critique your own kids, but when someone else comes and disses them, you're like, yo, slow off, that's my kids. And he's like, that's how we need to be about the country. Like, we need to respect this country and critique it from the inside and work to rebuild it from the inside. I think that's very possible, and I think that's very powerful. And one of the things that I also appreciated was that they didn't have this narrative of how we can bring the country back together, because they both clearly realize the country has never been together. And that's a narrative we also need to lose. So shout out to Nicolle Wallace for the Best People podcast. I think it's great. Some of the other guests are Rachel Maddows, Midas Touch brothers, who are doing their thing. I feel like it's a refreshing conversation with the different guests that she has on. I'm looking forward to hearing more. I'm looking forward to seeing where she's going to take it. I'm looking forward to see where Doc Rivers is going to take whatever he's doing. He said that if he wasn't in sports, he might be a politician, or at the very least analyzing politics. Nicolle Wallace said that she thinks the NBA is like the greatest sport. So she would probably be closer to it. So I thought it was an interesting dynamic, but I strongly encourage you all to check out the podcast and share your thoughts, because even if you haven't heard the other podcast, you can start with this one and just go back and check out the other ones. It's a great conversation. It's a necessary conversation, and I'm looking forward more to the Best People podcast. Peace.